We all know the classic story around weight loss, don't we? Calories in, calories out. The focus is almost always on the physical stuff, the big transformation, those before and after photos we see everywhere. But what about after? What happens when the scale finally says what you want, but maybe you still feel, well, a bit lost? Today, we're really going deep into that piece of the puzzle, the part that often gets sort of skipped over.
Exactly. And that's where Dan Hollis comes in. Our deep dive today is looking at his insights, particularly around weight loss now in the age of semaglutide. But the key thing right from the start is this isn't just about the medication. Not really. It's about the huge psychological, emotional journey that goes with it. We've got some really interesting stuff to draw on, like what he calls the Dan Hollis Semaglutide Manifesto and these field notes from his quiet window concept. Pretty compelling stuff.
Yeah, sounds fascinating. So our mission here is basically to pull out the really important bits about making change stick for good, moving past just the pounds on the scale to understand the mental and emotional reset that has to happen. Okay, let's get into it. So semaglutide, it gets talked about like this magic fix, doesn't it? You see the result and it looks like an easy answer. But Dan Hollis, he pushes back on that idea pretty hard. He says, and I think this is really central, this is not a drug journey, it's a human one. He's saying, yeah, it's a strong tool, definitely, but you've got to get what it's actually doing inside, how it's changing the way your brain processes hunger, feeling full, even reward.
And he describes that change, that shift, as being both liberating and kind of terrifying. It's a
Yeah.
massive shakeup to how you've related to food your whole life, maybe using it to cope with, well, everything.
Terrifying. Yeah, it's interesting. What is it that feels so scary about that shift? What are people suddenly facing?
That's a really good question. Hollis notes that, for so many people, food's been the constant, the reliable thing, the way to like calm yourself down. So when that fundamental connection changes and those urges you always felt just aren't hitting you the same way, it leaves this kind of space. And that can feel really unstable because you've lost a known way of dealing with your inner world, even if it wasn't healthy,
Mm.
which is exactly why he hammers home that it can't just be about the prescription. You absolutely need real support, education, actual human guidance to find your way in this new territory. It can be pretty disorienting otherwise.
Right. And that really connects with something so many people feel, that frustration. For years, it was all about just have more willpower. But if you've tried and failed countless times, you know deep down, like Hollis says, willpower was never the problem.
Mm.
That resonates, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And Hollis gives such a clear explanation here. He says, look, your biology, your emotions, those habit loops that are wired in, they're often just stacked against you. It's not about being weak or lacking discipline. He argues that what really works is different. It's, and this is from his manifesto, insight, structure, tools that meet your biology where it's at. It takes the blame off the person you see and puts it on to understanding the system you're working within.
Okay, so if it's not willpower, that brings us to this idea of emotional weight. He says it's just as important as the physical weight. We don't just eat because our stomach's rumbling. We eat when we're anxious or lonely or bored or we don't feel supported. And semaglutide, even though it's powerful, it's really only hitting the physical hunger signals.
Exactly, which then raises this really fascinating question, often a surprise. What happens when that physical drive goes down, but all those emotional reasons are still there? And this is right where his quiet window idea fits in. There's this great story, an anecdote about a woman, Kate, from his notes. Kate's 46, has 3 kids. She's 2 months in, using semaglutide. She's lost about 7 pounds. So, medically, things are going okay. But the thing that really struck her, the big surprise, wasn't the weight loss. It was, in her words, the craving that didn't show up.
Wow, the absence of it, something that was always there.
Exactly right. Kate realized she'd always lived by these food rhythms. Afternoon energy dip, grab some chips, feeling lonely, bread, celebrating something, cake. Food had an answer for almost every feeling. And then, one day, just quiet. The usual signal wasn't there.
And Hollis apparently described that moment, a moment most people might just ignore. He told her, and this is from the notes, that's the quiet window. That's the moment where the food stops answering your questions and the real ones start talking.
It is, isn't it? It leads to this unexpected emotional fallout. Hollis actually calls it the grief of losing the thing that numbed you. It wasn't that Kate missed the actual food. She missed the signal, the rhythm of it all, the story she told herself, at least I know how to feel full. She described it like her brain felt like a library after closing time. She said, everything feels like truth now, just raw. And in that quiet, these huge questions start bubbling up. What am I hungry for when I'm not hungry? Who am I without the chase? What's left when the noise goes? It's a real moment of self-confrontation.
And Kate's experience, the very personal story, really shines a light on Hollis's whole approach.
Mhm.
He says his real work begins when the human sitting across from him begins to hear the echoes of all the years they used food to muffle deeper questions. So it's about shifting from just pushing feelings down to actually understanding them.
Precisely. And one of the absolute killer points Hollis makes is this. Weight loss is biology. Staying there is narrative. That's powerful. He explains that hunger doesn't just poof disappear. It sort of shapeshifts. It might become memory or confusion or just space. And he gives this warning. People don't relapse into hunger. They relapse into confusion.
That is incredibly insightful.
Hmm.
Okay, so if staying there is narrative and the danger is confusion, how does he help people actually build that new story? Does he talk about, like, common pitfalls there? Or how people struggle with that?
Yeah, that's a key point. He gets that people won't just automatically know how to handle this new internal state. It's unfamiliar. So instead of just, cheerleading or more rules, he offers scaffolding. That's his term. And what he means by that is not motivation, but momentum. Not restriction, but recognition. The semaglutide might clear the path, but you still have to build the new habits to move forward on it. It's about putting supports in place, basically, so that new story has a chance to grow.
Okay, so it's about consciously choosing what fills that quiet space, building new patterns.
Yes, exactly. And Kate's journey shows this really well. It wasn't some big dramatic light bulb moment. It was, a Wednesday where she just didn't snack through feeling sad because the urge wasn't driving her, or a Thursday where she thought about it and chose tea instead of that second glass of wine, finding comfort differently, and then maybe a Sunday where she went for a walk, not thinking about calories burned, but because, as she described it, it felt like a conversation with her future self. She's not suddenly fixed or anything, but she's there. She's here in the quiet, listening, and actively constructing that new narrative piece by piece. And this scaffolding is so important because, as Hollis points out in the manifesto, the after the medication phase is where the rubber meets the road. Those old habits, the emotional triggers, they can definitely pop back up if these new ways of being aren't practiced and reinforced.
And running through all of this, Hollis keeps this really compassionate tone, doesn't he? There is no shame here, only process. He really wants people to understand you're not broken, you're not lazy, you're not undisciplined. You are working against some powerful biology and maybe a culture that nobody ever really explained properly. It feels very kind.
It really is. He frames the whole thing as a conversation, not a prescription.
Right.
It's all about your relationship with food, with your body, and yeah, with the guides and the community supporting you. His role, as he sees it, is providing a map, a guide, and a community. It's something you do with people, not just something done to you.
Which all leads to his really powerful conclusion. You're not starting over. You're starting right. Meaning, you're finally aligning with how your body and brain actually function with the right kind of help to create something that can actually last. It feels like a much more hopeful way to frame it all. So pulling these threads together from Dan Hollis's work, what we really see is that the journey after the pounds come off involves some pretty deep emotional and psychological lifting. It often happens in that surprising, quiet window, that silence where the old urges used to be. Semaglutide, then, it's not the end goal. It's more like a key that unlocks the door to this much deeper, more transformative work.
Absolutely. And perhaps the final thought Hollis leaves us wrestling with is this. Weight loss can change your body, but only story can change your future. And then the kicker. And if you're not careful, biology will give you results that psychology will dismantle. It really makes you think, doesn't it? What kind of personal scaffolding do you need to build? What's the new narrative you need to write for yourself? One that holds up long after the initial changes.
Because ultimately, this journey isn't really just about eating less food. It's about finding ways to live more fully,